Thank you very much for those of you who've watched at home and those of you here with us today. It's been great to listen to the stories the guys have come up with. But this is the bit where we want to throw it open to you. It's we always say that the EBN Live shows are absolutely about participation from your point of view. So we've got a microphone and we'd like to hear some questions from you. All I ask again, as I've said before, is if you stand up and just tell us who you are and what your question would be. So begin the deluge. Who's going to go first? There's a question down here.
I'm Ralph Tribe. I'm from Big People. We're a inclusive search business and we do people strategy. And I have a question for Doug. So your super validated carbon credits, which I really like the sound of. Previously, I worked for Sky, which people may or may not know were into ESG and doing a really good job of this a long time ago. And I think they would have bought a lot of properly validated carbon credits very quickly. So I was just sort of wondering, how much capacity does a farm like yours have to make available to industry super validated carbon credits? Because you sort of get the sense there may not be quite enough to go around.
Yeah, good question. So our farm has a net sequestration above all emissions of about 1,000, just under 1,000 tonnes a year. So that's our little farm. So that's 900 acres. That's not untypical of a farm in our situation. We've done a rough calculation. If every farmer across the country took up regenerative practices, we're looking at about 17 to 25 million tonnes a year that could become available. The UK, to put it into perspective, total emissions of about 450 million. Now that's cheating because that doesn't include consumption. That's only actual emissions created in this country. If we looked at our consumption emissions, they'd be much higher. And to offset all of that, not that that will ever happen, but would be impossible from the UK. So the UK's got a big decision to make about whether it looks abroad to import offsets, which is currently largely what's happening. But those countries are going to have to be careful about letting too much go to meet their own net zero ambitions. And this is the conversation the world's got to have with itself about national determined emissions and what they're allowed to let go and so on and so forth. Yeah.
Just one point to add on to it. I think everything you've said about the UK doesn't have the capacity to provide all of that, but what is an option for organisations that are at in the right position in a supply chain is to actually help the farmers to embark on that journey by kind of almost insetting into their supply chain in terms of if you can give the farmers confidence that by making those decisions they're going to still have them as a customer. That's actually quite a good way of decarbonising. And yes, okay, it may not cover all of the decarbonisation required, but from a point of view of the kind of a good philosophical way to take it would be actually that's a model that our farms should be using if you're in the food and drink sector.
Hi, Anne-Marie Slot with Ashurst. I know we have various financiers in the room. You said it's a 15-year journey for you. I think for farmers and for lots of people in agriculture, this first few years are right scary, right? Because you're not in a place where you can get the certifications and the higher levels of income, but you're moving away from conventional farming. What was it that enabled you to take that first, kind of year one, year two leap? And is there a product or structure that you think would help from a finance perspective to support that?
Great question. So we consider it to be a journey because if you adopt regenerative agricultural practices over a long period of time, you don't see a drop in income. And in fact, you'll probably see from day one an improvement in net income. Okay, so the farmer, we always encourage farmers to create a plan. We help them do that, and there shouldn't need to be too much external financing. Now there is an issue here because one of the key tenets of offsets and offsetting is that it's an investment in a change in management that makes a difference. What we say, and this is where we have to be careful with our language, is that actually changing to regenerative agricultural practices makes you more money in the first place. Offsetting is a lovely additional source of income. So that might be, the way we say is, this is your incentive. Your incentive is to become more profitable day one by using less fertilizers, doing all sorts of different things. We talk about early, mid and late transitions. And then when you get a bit further down the line and you've got to that net position of sequestration, then you've got this additional income that you can tap into.
Excellent, thank you. Ben, did you want to?
Yeah, I just think it's, and I think your video mentioned it, the need for policy coming downwards to support farmers at the bottom trying to make changes, and it's just a really poignant time with the movement over to the Environmental Land Management Scheme, which is the replacement for the Common Agricultural Policy. So farmers are changing farmers don't have a choice. Farmers are having it changed to them how they're getting their subsidies and their grant schemes. I was just wondering, Doug, what your views were on whether you think the new changes are going to support farmers making changes compared to where you were 15 years ago? Do you think it's a better position? Because that is the aim of it, I guess, these changes.
Definitely. So there's a new sustainable farming incentive, which gives a certain amount of money for which you have to do certain things. One of them is, it's all centered around soil health. So it's all around getting those baselines. So the first thing you do is test your soil, see where your carbon levels are, and it will pay for those baselines, which at the moment farmers have been quite nervous to do because they haven't seen, well, show me the money, then I'll do a baseline. But actually the government have said, here's the money, get on and get a baseline, and then hopefully that's going to bring more farmers forward.
Hi, James Close from NatWest Group, and a comment and a question, I think, in terms of where does the money go and how do you facilitate this? Because we've just done our climate transition plan, and I think 19% of the carbon on our balance sheet is from farms, but it's 2% of our lending. So when we talk, everybody talks about stopping the harmful activity like oil and gas, but we're not going to stop banking farmers. But we do want to partner with them to reduce emissions, and we also want to be part of a supply chain that's changing. So you need to look upstream on the supply side towards or downstream, depending which way you look at it, towards the supermarkets who've all got targets as well to reduce the climate impact or the nature impact of their food baskets. So the question that I'd like to ask the panel is, how can we accelerate the scale up of the transition, and how do we bring in the consumer, the retailer, the food processor to align with government policy in a way that can make this happen much, much more quickly than it's currently happening? It's great to see you guys up here, but there's still a hell of a lot of other people who aren't doing the brilliant work that you're doing.
Who wants to pick that up?
I'm happy to start.
Simon, please do.
I think outside of the consumer point on that, I guess my view is that it's kind of all in on collaboration, because the only way in which we can expedite the pace, de-risk, manage the knowledge transfer that sits around all of this, all the tactical commercial challenges, is find excellent opportunities to collaborate, and then either that be a sector vertical or be that farm to farm. Like I've got clients that the local farmer is a livestock farmer, they're a fresh produce farmer, and they're rotational farming on the land to improve the soil. Like it's an obvious collaboration at a micro level, but sector verticals are part of that. That doesn't necessarily deal with the consumer side of this, which I think is a wider challenge that, honestly, I think as an industry we've still got a long way to go before we figure out how to actually get the message across in a way which makes sense, because there are individual purchasing decisions that massively leverage the scale of some of this. And if people were just like, right, okay, actually, the kind of shift we had a decade ago on free-range egg, if some of those shifts were to occur, be it single-use plastics after turtles on TV, we need a few more of those pivotal moments. So,
I think as well it's sort of pushing for governmental change as well. and some top-down leadership on particularly surrounding food waste and surrounding the sort of food supply system in the UK, particularly around imports and exports as well, would certainly help a long way into decarbonising the farming and also to assisting farmers with profitability and getting some and sort of enabling them to put those systems into place as well. Which so voting.
I think a critical piece is reconnecting the consumer. Consumers, you can all make huge amounts. You know, Simon's touched on it already. Consumers, through their purchasing decisions, can change the planet today by buying less crap. Buying food, carefully considering your food purchases, all that sort of thing. One of the issues we have is our retail sector in the UK is too powerful. You know, I sit here as a farmer. I've been a direct supplier to a retailer. It was the worst experience of my life. Lost money, hated every second of it. And I was the first one in the country to actually phone them up one day and said, unless you change your contract, we're out of here. And they said, go on then. So I did. So the following day, they had no produce of these particular lines. You've never seen some executives move so quickly. They all came down to the farm and said, look, it's too late, I'm done. But anyway, but one of the issues we have is they're too powerful. They have the ability to do so much. We were touched on this beforehand, but they're so scared of inflation, of course of food inflation. And we need to somehow make the supply chain a more equitable place so that producers are willing to take a bit more of a risk, knowing that they're going to be financially rewarded. At the moment, there are some huge apple growers, egg producers, pork producers up and down the country are losing millions because of the relationship they've got. And it doesn't enable them to make the changes that are required.
And we'll have some retailers on next time around. No.
Are you going to have some farmers with them?
So that's an after the watershed thing that we'll do on it. There was two hands over there as well. So.
Hello there, I'm David Eyre from Earth and Sun. One of the issues in the sector is linking, whether it be a developer who's got BNG credits that they need to, or BNG points they need to be able to put somewhere. But the other side of it is, how do you link those people with the landowners to enable this to work? And ultimately, there's so many different schemes and different processes out there. Is there going to be do you see there's going to be a one route to market going both ways for these situations?
Ben, do you want to say that?
Yeah, sure. So there's going to be a lot of routes, I think, inevitably. The main one will be Natural England are pulling together a register for biodiversity, net gain, habitat banks. So it won't be a marketplace, there won't be transactions on it, but it will provide a list of all available biodiversity units or biodiversity habitat banks in England. And it's organised by local planning authority, because the way it works is it's trying to encourage the offsetting of the impact in the same local planning authority. So a developer will be able to look on the open market and see where the nearest habitat bank is and approach them and try and purchase those units. Again, similar to the carbon element, big developers, big housing developers, big civil engineering companies now are realising that that probably isn't the most profitable way of doing it, and are trying to enter into agreements with large landowners about, can we pre-buy some of these units. There's no time limit on, I could create a habitat bank now and sell the units in 60 years' time. If I purchased that, if I've developed that and I've got all the evidence showing that what it was before I made my intervention and what it will be, I can hold that back for a housing developer who'll need it in 2040, as opposed to kind of selling it now. So there will be that big site register where most people will use, but there's also these kind of private avenues that people will be starting to develop more and more.
I'm Kasia from Ashton Climate Solutions, a small charity. I have two questions, if that's not too greedy. So the first one, are there any kind of leaders in training provision for farmers to teach farmers how to grow regeneratively? And the second one was on something you haven't touched on yet, which is the health aspect of regeneratively grown food. I've heard it said that if we can provide sort of unequivocal evidence that regen outgrown carrot is better for us than a conventionally grown we basically cracked it. So do you agree with that? And do you see any kind of breakthroughs on the horizon there?
Yeah, great question. So my son is at Harper Adams University up in Shropshire. He's in his last year doing his final dissertation, and he still isn't being taught anything about regenerative agriculture. So he learns more about regenerative agriculture when he comes home than he does there. They are touching on it, but it's early days. It really is peer-to-peer. Generally, there's lots of groups. There's a great organisation and show called Groundswell that's on every year, which people go to, which is a great place to learn. We're all really good at sharing what we do because we're not generally in competition with anyone. So yeah, so it's generally peer-to-peer. You know, someone interested talking to someone who's doing it, and that's really working well and growing. And we encourage that. We encourage lots of people to come visit us. The second part of the question is really simple. We know that regeneratively farmed produce is more nutrient dense than something that's, a tomato grown outside in my market garden is equivalent to 5 tomatoes grown in a massive greenhouse, not that far away from us in Kent. And that's just one example. We know that grains are more nutrient dense. Often heritage grains that are grown in a regenerative system cause less problems with gluten intolerance. There's loads of evidence of this, and it's building and building and building and building. And there's a body of evidence that we're hopefully going to be publishing quite soon, which will make everybody buy regenerative food, because why wouldn't you? Yeah. Sorry, I overhogged that one.
No, that's good. That's good. I'm just looking to the lawyers over there and just thinking, are we in trouble? How close was this?
I didn't realise they were actually.
They're acting for the I'm joking, and that bit will be edited out. So it would be amusing if they were actually. But, right, one final question over here, please.
Hi, I'm Lindsay. I work for Ever Sustainable, a small sustainability consultancy. My question is really linked to the previous one about kind of the social benefits of regenerative agriculture, and if there's any kind of further points you guys would make. You've talked a lot about the environmental and kind of economic benefits, but if there's any other social or societal, kind of in addition to the health benefits that are worth highlighting, particularly in the context of just transition and thinking about how we can make kind of decarbonization work for everyone.
Who wants to take that? Simon, you ever got that one?
Yeah, I think when you look at sustainability in a holistic sense, the reality is that if you go back to the point you made earlier about it being a philosophy, the reality is if you take the right philosophy to it all, you create better answers overall. I think one of the things that for me kind of stands out with kind of regenerative agriculture is that you're building a better local space, which has profound implications in lots of different ways. It will be better for everybody's health in the fullness of time. The biodiversity locally will be better off. The air quality will improve. It may also be integrated in terms of some of the landowners with areas that create exercise spaces and outdoor spaces. The reality is we do need more of nature protected. And I think there is also a reality in all of this that actually done the right way, there are job benefit creations and skills and other pieces behind that. I don't have statistics behind it, but I do know that people who are pushing in that direction are seeing secondary benefits left, right, and centre, because it just becomes one of those things that once you start doing it, everything gets better.
Yeah. Well, I'd also point you to watch the film of Farm Ed again. One of the bits in it that they touch on is about their market garden. I think it was an acre or something, wasn't it? With 5 acres. 5 acres. And effectively, that was for the community within that whole area. Their customers were the community, and people came and actually picked the veg themselves and felt included in it. So whether it was a deliberate intention or at the very least as a byproduct, it was having this impact of creating that sense of community together. And that, pulling people together under common theme of whether it be we're growing our vegetables together or not, it's got to be a good thing. So I think it's almost that we've had a debate before on one of these live shows about a conflict between the E and S of VSG, but I think there's some superb areas where the E and the S come together, and that would be a case in point. Feels to me it's a little sporadic still. Like a lot of this stuff is that it's early stages, but the more And one of the things that we want to do with the EBN, and I'd implore everybody to just tell as many good news stories as possible. How many case studies can we all talk about where there has been positive upside, whether it be economically, environmentally, or socially? This is what we all need to do, is to convince other people, the farmers as an example, follow suit and get on board with that. Guys, thank you so much. I will draw a line now. And so thanks to Doug, Simon, Ben, and to Seb. Your time has been superb. It's been great listening to you guys. Thank you. Thank you. The Environmental Business Network is here to help all businesses adapt to and benefit from the very different economic and environmental futures we all face. Subscribe to our YouTube channel or visit the website to find out more information.